Today, my guest is Lindsey Haskin, the director of the new documentary, The Fish Thief. Lindsey, welcome, welcome to our channel. Just by way of background, The Fish Thief explores quite a menacing mystery that, if left unchecked, could have really threatened the viability of the Great Lakes and the communities living around the Great Lakes in this country. So, Lindsey, how did you come to this topic?
Well, it's kind of a filmmaker's dream. I was commissioned to make the film, and I was commissioned by people who helped me make a previous film about the Great Lakes. I made a 2-hour public television film about the Great Lakes that aired for 3 years. It started airing in 2010. And it basically traced the history of the relationship between people in the Great Lakes ecosystem. The first half of it was about how people came into the Great Lakes region, waves of different people, beginning with indigenous people came into the Great Lakes region, used natural resources to, build societies. And then when after the indigenous people came in, Europeans came in and just came in and started exploiting natural resources to the point of basically exhaustion, and then moving on to other places. So the first that came in were the fur traders. The people like John Jacob Astor came in and made their fortunes in the Great Lakes. He was followed by the fur traders were followed by timber people who came in and cut trees, and then they were followed by the miners and the people who used the mineral resources. For example, John D. Rockefeller started the oil industry, the American oil industry in the Great Lakes region. Not many people know that.
I didn't know that.
Oil was discovered in the Great Lakes region 50 years before they found it in Texas. And so John D. Rockefeller made his fortune there. The first headquarters of Standard Oil was in Cleveland, Ohio. And then Andrew Carnegie basically started the steel industry, to be a big industry in Pennsylvania, all on iron ore that came from the Great Lakes region, and anthracite coal that came from the Great Lakes region. And that culminated in Henry Ford making the auto industry, and mass production started in the Great Lakes region. And so the first half of the film tells that story, how the Great Lakes region became the great industrial heartland that was the center of the arsenal of democracy that won World War II. The second half talked about how that all that economic activity impacted the Great Lakes themselves, and how people have been trying to put them back together from all of the pollution and dam building and habitat destruction that happened there, that changed the Great Lakes a lot. But people have been trying to put them back together to resemble something like their natural state. And so one aspect of that story was this story that The Fish Thief is about. It's about an invasive species that came into the Great Lakes and basically wiped out the fish that anybody cared about. The basis of the commercial fishing industry there. And then some tenacious, remarkable people who took up the challenge of trying to do something about that and save Great Lakes fisheries. So
There's I was going to say, there's tremendously impressive research, obviously, on screen. Did you have a background in the sciences?
I was a good student. That's about all I can say about that. I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for a couple of years. Then I came out to Cal Berkeley and stayed in California. I live in California now, but I still spent a lot of time in the Great Lakes region. But I had done a lot of the research. I knew a lot of the story already from having researched it for my first film. But then the people who contracted me to make or commissioned me to make the film, hired a postgrad to go around and find as many people as they could who were first person participants in the story. And so that he did a lot of the bulk of the research, and then I was able to take what I knew about it and then learn more and piggyback on what he had researched and build the story. So
You mentioned something I think that will be of great interest to filmmakers. You described this as I think, a dream come true,
yes.
being able to make a documentary and having somebody else commission it and pay for it. I mean, besides the obvious ways that gives you more breathing room as a filmmaker, what were there ups and downs as part of that process?
Well, there were challenges with it because people when people give you an opportunity to do something, they always have something in their head that they're hoping you're going to do. And that, but fortunately, they liked the first film that I made so much, which they helped me to make. They gave me access to people and laboratories and places and all these kinds of things. So they had seen my work and liked what I did, and they gave me the opportunity to make the film that I thought would be the most compelling to achieve, the objective that I hope would move the most people. So, but they had a whole different idea about things, and it was an interesting dance to get to the point where they let me make the film I made, I wanted to make, which was wonderful. And the best part about it, as I was alluding to, is I didn't have to go out and apply for grants. I didn't have to go out and look
Right.
for funders, look for corporate sponsorship or any of those kinds of things. It was there, and I could just get to work on the film. So
Well, you raised something that I hear a lot in conversations with other filmmakers who are making um, films about individuals, about the importance of trust. And I guess in this case, you didn't need to gain the trust of the Great Lakes, but you did need to gain the trust of the company that was commissioning it, the trust that you would make a film that was strong and good and reflected your vision, but was also in line with their goals.
yes, yeah, basically what that was about is just be factual. It's one of my biggest fears is that somebody's going to give me a bunch of money to go make a film, and I don't do my homework correctly, and as soon as it hits the screen, we get a call saying, you have this all wrong. What you're talking about isn't accurate, and it's totally different than the way you portrayed it. So I'm extremely careful about those kinds of things and look for multiple sources to be able to verify the claims that I'm making, and consult tons of different experts and those kinds of things. So multiple, print sources, multiple human sources, all different kinds of things, and current, living subject matter experts that I run things by as well. So,
You have a beautiful use of archival footage
well,
in
thank
the
you.
film. Can you, just for the benefit of filmmakers watching, can you talk about the process of finding and clearing the footage that you selected?
Well, we found it in tons of different places. Some of the images that are in there are images that I found in my first film. So I spent a lot of time going around to small towns. I did a lot of the filming myself, and so when I was in small towns, I would visit historical societies and museums and different things. And then the internet helped a lot with just being able to find things. But then also the people who I met, the subject matter experts, the scientists, the engineers, the different people who were involved with this were aware of where a lot of these historical images came from, including a lot of government agencies like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, for instance, and Michigan Department of Natural Resources. They have images, and they had made films in the past, and they kind of steered me to where those materials are stored now. A lot of them in different archives in different places, some university libraries, some like state archives in different places. And so,
So do you just call up US Fish and Wildlife and say, I need some archival footage, where do I go? I mean,
no,
what's the actual step-by-step process of finding the sort of images you want?
well, a lot of government agencies will have historians, and so you can get in touch with those people. There are people who have written books on the subjects that the source materials that I would use to help me build my story. I would get in touch with people who had written books about it that had images in those books and a lot of times those images are listed or in the appendix or sometimes right on the images themselves in those books, and they tell you what archive those images come from. So that's it just takes a lot of work, a lot of digging, and going different places. And the thing about this story and any stories about the Great Lakes is it's binational. The Great Lakes are the
Yeah,
border between Canada and the United States. So there are archives in the United States and in Canada that need to be consulted. And but what I find, what the thing that I like to do, and I think any filmmaker would be thrilled about doing, is finding images that no one's ever used before in a
right.
book or in another film or something like that. So, and those that's where the little historical societies or the little museum in this little small town or something like that, or a lot of, some of the people who appear in the film, some of the scientists who were first person participants in the story, they had photo collections as well. And so when I went to shoot the interviews with them, I'd bring a scanner with me and scan those images and be able to use them. And so it's just, it's just a
And
lot of.
did you hire an archivist to help you negotiate each individual license with each individual intellectual property holder?
Well, a lot of them are public domain.
Ah,
A lot of them who I got, if they come from government agencies, a lot of those are just automatically public domain. And so, the public paid for them, taxpayer dollars paid for those. And so, normally they're fair use kinds of things. But a lot of the people, whose personal images I was able to use, I got permission from them and documentation of that they gave me permission to use those. So.
um, and then in the process, I know the film has screened widely in public venues and is now available on a variety of uh, distribution platforms. Um, how have you found the process of the exploitation of this film? What have you learned?
It's been a very interesting thing. I've one thing that in particular about that I've learned is that we've been in a number of nature film festivals or wildlife film festivals or environmental film festivals. A number of different film festivals that the word nature, wildlife, and environment are in the names of the films. And one of the things that I was struck with, when I go to the festivals, I like to see, the other films that are there, and there's lots of beautiful films, but lots of films that are kind of similar to one another. Like I've seen lots and lots of films about whales, which are very inspirational and very beautiful films to see and everything. But the one thing that I notice at these film festivals is it tends to be the same people coming to the films who are already there. The nature films and wildlife films tend to preach to the choir. And
Right.
I think anybody who makes those kinds of films loves nature and loves biodiversity, wants to see biodiversity preserved and sustained and those kinds of things. And I just found myself questioning myself as how much are we doing when we're just getting the same people? And a lot of times those films are turning other people off who we kind of need to get into the fold, into that audience to be able to really make a big difference for them to appreciate preserving nature and preserving biodiversity and those kinds of things. So
But
that's
but I sense this film has appealed beyond that typical choir.
that's one of the things that I feel especially fortunate for having had the opportunity to make this film is that uh, this film is about fishing in the Great Lakes. It's called The Fish Thief, and it's about fishing and the social and economic importance of fishing. Fishing is really the star of the film. No one would have cared about this animal that came into the Great Lakes if they didn't care about fishing and they didn't want to protect it. And so in the Great Lakes region, and I think in most parts around the world, fishing is something that appeals to people from all political persuasions, all racial groups, all ethnic groups, people from all walks of life, all socioeconomic levels. People want to have fish in water so that they can go catch them. Some want to catch them for commercial reasons. Some want to catch them for sporting reasons. And there's still a lot of people around the world who fish for sustenance. They fish to put food on the table. And so
Right.
so this is about something that's universally important and is in the Great Lakes region. And I live near San Diego now. Commercial fishing is a big industry around many parts of coastal areas. And so there's a huge economic importance, and it's a huge contributor to tourism and different industries around so protecting fishing is a big thing. And so that we've been very fortunate, in the film festivals that we've gone to and then different screenings that we've held, we're drawing people from sport fishing associations. We're drawing people, who would not necessarily, who maybe are turned off by the word nature or environment or biodiversity. Those kinds of things turn some people across the political spectrum off. But we're getting those kinds of people here, and hopefully we're at least opening their minds to consider more types of films like this. More films about nature and wildlife and how natural resource to contribute to the quality of their lives.
That's fantastic. Just to give us a taste of your experience at festivals and public screenings, what's the is there a question that somebody's asked you that sticks in your mind as something that you find very surprising?
Well, the one that I always get is how did I get J.K. Simmons to narrate this film? But the other one is you know what's going on with sea lamprey now? You know, are there you know is it going to be dangerous for me if I go swimming in the Great Lakes? Am I going to get one of these things on me or something? And they've never attacked people. You know, there's nothing along those lines. And to be honest with you, most people think that the problem is over with, but it's something that still needs to be controlled, is still actively controlled in the Great Lakes. They've been doing it for 70 years, and if they and they, there was just an accidental test of what would happen if sea lamprey control were to stop, and that came in the form of the pandemic when
Uh,
people weren't able to go out and work in the field and go out and you know look for these animals in their spawning streams and then apply you know the solution to control them. And over those 2 years of the pandemic, when no one was able to go out into the field and do that work, their numbers just skyrocketed. And so it just basically unintentionally, it was an unintentional test that proved that this has to keep going on, and that you know uh, people are in the business of controlling this organism in the Great Lakes in perpetuity. So.
I mean, like many, I'm a huge fan of J.K. Simmons. How did you get
Uh, it was, you know, when it came time to think about a narrator for the film, he was right at the top of my list. I mean, I like his voice. You know, I think I'm a fan of his. He and I are of the same vintage, and so you know, I admire his career very much, the tenacity that he's had, and the persistence he's had to hang in there and to really hit, you know, be successful and get an Oscar. You know, far into his career,
it?
I've always just been a big admirer of his, and so I was able to track him down and then and get in touch with his agent, and we talked back and forth about things. And we didn't have a whole lot of money to offer him, but as it turns out, he is from the Great Lakes region.
Ah,
He was born in the Detroit area and lived there until he was 10 years old. And then, interestingly enough, his father was a teacher, and then his father moved the family to Columbus, Ohio, where his father was actually a music professor at Ohio State University.
oh, really?
If you know what he won the Oscar for,
Right.
this just malevolent music professor in Whiplash, you know, it's just such a great story. So anyway, and as it turns out, he spent summer vacations on the lake shores of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. You know, that's where he grew up and had his summer vacation. So he has you know, a soft spot in his heart for the Great Lakes and a fondness for it, and a fond memory. And it was really it was a wonderful day working with him. I had to fly to Atlanta to record him there, where he was making this movie that just came out called Red One, where he
Okay.
played Santa Claus and
Oh,
Santa
right.
Claus with and he's with Dwayne the Rock Johnson in that movie, and he was filming it, and he had his big beard on and all that stuff. But I had the opportunity to just after we recorded the script. It was wonderful because he knew how to pronounce all the Great Lakes words. You know, there's towns in the Great Lakes called Sault Ste. Marie, SAULT period STE,
Oh.
and so I didn't have to school him on a lot of the names there, so it was really wonderful. But after we recorded the narration, I had the opportunity to have lunch with him and sit around and talk with him for like an hour and a half, and it was just one of those great days of my life. I'll always remember it as just being a really a fantastic day, and really enjoyed his company. He's just a really nice guy. So.
Oh, how great. Do you have any, as we're wrapping up, do you have any questions for me?
Just hoping that we can get some numbers. We're looking to be able to strategize about where we can go next, and we're really hoping to get the streaming numbers about how we're doing out there, and where we're doing well, and places where we can maybe focus a little more of our promotional efforts and those kinds of things.
I mean,
So
as we've talked about offline,
yeah.
um, the reporting, while accurate from all the platforms, is not as speedy as we would like. I mean, it would be great if every day we could see the number of viewers, the
Yeah.
number of hours of views, but that's not. Maybe one day with AI, but that's not
Yeah.
where we are today.
That's what
But
I was.
But thank you for your time.
Yeah, we'll be
Okay.
talking soon, I hope. So
Okay.
have a
Bye.